One of the more challenging sets of questions about how to ask for a pay raise is in this category of handling company politics and pushback. Nobody likes those words, right? So, we are going to talk for a few minutes now about navigating bureaucracies, power dynamics, and these no budget excuses, which I'm sorry to beat you to the punch here, are not necessarily just excuses. Sometimes there really is no budget, and you need to accept that and either move on or don't. But let's get into it with some of the specific questions that I've gotten. One is who to ask if your boss doesn't control the budget. And my answer is really simple. It's still your boss. There just are not that many times in work, whether it's about raises or something else, where you want to go around your boss without having gotten that person's buy in first. So if you do go to your boss and you make the ask and that person is telling you, sorry, would love to help, but I don't control the budget, then what you want to say is, okay, who does? Because I would like to go talk to that person and see what your boss's reaction is to that. You can also explicitly ask for your boss's support in going to that person. You can confirm that even though your boss is saying they don't control the budget, you can ask whether they would advocate for you, assuming that they can have the conversation with whoever does control the budget. And you can also ask whether they would go have that conversation potentially on your behalf. But again, the person you should talk to, even if you're getting that answer that your boss doesn't control the budget, still is your boss. The next question is getting buy-in from HR and finance when they block raises. So this is really frustrating, and it is another situation where you need to engage your boss. In some cases, what I have seen happen, and this is really unfair for lack of a better way of saying it, is that your boss will tell you, oh, I would love to give you a raise, but HR isn't letting me or finance isn't letting me. Now, in some cases, this may be totally true because there is a pay band. So, meaning that range that your salary has to exist within based on your role and level. And if that is the band that the company has set, then it is HR's job to enforce that. So, that would be a true statement from your boss, like, I would love to pay you more, but can't do it here. Or if there is simply is not the money from finance and the P&L cannot support it, then that also could be true. But I've seen those cases also where the boss wants to be the good guy, or good anybody, and say, I want to give you the raise and I'm just not allowed. And really that's just an excuse for not fully supporting you. So it is important here that you use this moment, not just for your earnings, but for your career trajectory, to really get a straight answer from your boss on whether they support your growth in this organization or not. Because you want to understand whether it truly is a pay band or budget constraint, or whether your boss is not even advocating for you. And so that's sort of the long answer to getting buy-in from HR and finance. It's really not about that, about the buy-in. It's about understanding what the HR and finance constraints are or are not, and then making sure that regardless of them, you have the support of your boss. The next question is how to negotiate in rigid or centralized comp structures. I think this is that question about pay bands that I often talk about, where for every role, level, geography in some cases, there is a bottom and a top that everybody who has similar jobs will be paid. And those are rigid. And so when this question asker says how to negotiate in rigid comp structures, they're rigid. They're rigid for a reason. The company wants them to be rigid. And I rarely, if ever, see those broken through because one person is looking to be paid more. So, what can you do in that situation? Because I don't want to just tell you the bad news. First of all, it's understanding and having an awareness of what that band is for you so that is it worth continuing to ask for more at this level? Or are you already at the top of the pay band? And so your only option is to switch functions or get promoted or potentially leave the organization to be paid more. But I don't generally recommend pounding the table and insisting that an organization break the pay band for you because it really almost never happens in my experience. What to say if told there's no budget or try next year? So I think we've talked about the no budget issue a little bit. What I will add to that is to explain that there are things you can ask for that affect a company's budget differently. So maybe they don't want to commit to the ongoing investment in a higher base salary for you that will continue year after year as long as you're with the organization. But maybe they are willing to offer a one-time bonus that they don't necessarily then need to budget for on a recurring basis. Or maybe they don't even have the cash for that, but they're able to offer you a retention bonus that would be paid next year, or another retentive measure, which could be stock, for example, or equity in the company. And so probing on what can happen in a budget constrained environment and asking questions about how your manager or the organization have dealt with this before can be one way to go here. The try next year answer is a little bit different. That requires you to accept that in some ways as the answer right now, but really demand, in the most polite way possible, clarity on what the expectation is for next year. So, are you being told try next year because your manager thinks that the company will be budgetarily in a healthier spot then? And in the absence of that, what are they going to do for you? So, understanding that. Or are they saying try next year because they don't think you are ready yet, which happens often? And in that case, you deserve to know what ready will look like. So, what are the goals? It should not be a goal line that is constantly moving farther or moving side to side so that you don't know what it is and can't go after it. You need to know what the specific expectations are that will allow you to be promoted or get a raise, assuming you meet and exceed those expectations. It shouldn't just be try next year and then you spend the next year not knowing exactly what you're trying to do. Okay, so that's a really important one, both for earnings purposes, but also just for career development and trajectory purposes. And then lastly, in this super fun bucket, is how to handle retaliation or negative reactions. So as I've said before, I am not an employment lawyer. If you think that, you are the victim of sort of what I call capital R retaliation, that is not something that I am going to be able to address well. But the way that I'm going to interpret this question is you just feel like after you ask for a raise, you're not getting the best possible work, or people don't like you anymore, or you're not invited to certain meetings, or they kind of just think that you're a nuisance, right? Those types of things. So the first piece to be aware of is that the way you ask for that raise really is the driver of how people view you afterwards, and whether they say, wow, this is somebody who was mature and thoughtful and brought a data-driven case and expressed her career aspirations, and it was a good conversation, right? That only actually can create more respect for you. But if you're somebody who makes the mistake of asking at the wrong time, so maybe you just missed a major deliverable and yet you're in the office asking for a raise, or maybe the company just announced something this week that has everybody really distracted, or maybe you got a raise last quarter and now you're back asking for yet another one, which is too soon. Those are the types of things that really create this negative reaction and can hurt your credibility within the organization afterwards. So, if somebody is already in this situation where they feel like there is some level of retaliation or negativity about the ask, I would go straight in and actually just, ask what you did wrong, and how it was received that you brought up the conversation about the raise. There's no harm in actually addressing that straight on. I often find that that can be disarming and can actually be helpful in getting you feedback so that you understand and can course correct if necessary. Um, but again, the best thing to do is to avoid this by following all of the guidance we're talking about from the outset so that you don't set the stage for those types of reactions.